Hello and welcome to Gravid Husbands Conversations. Today, in Being a Dad series, KK and I are going to talk about parental anxiety from dad's point of view. Anxiety is part of life. We can't avoid it. But we should learn to manage it, otherwise, it can damage our families. KK and I are going to talk about the trigger points for anxieties, our coping mechanisms, and so on. Before we go on, let me also set the stage and the expectations. I have two boys. KA has a son and a daughter. They are still young. Our kids are still in school going ages. They have not appeared for board exams. We have not stood in line for hours for college admissions. We have not handled the tension of marriage and so on and so forth. And we are not counselors. We are not telling you how to handle anxiety in all its different forms. Then why are we doing this? To paraphrase KK, this is an exercise for our younger self and our older self. We wish someone taught us what we learned in the hard way, and we want to look back through our dad journey. In a way, this is a documentary of our journey as being a dad. Hope you find it interesting. KK, welcome to the conversation.
Yeah, anxious about this conversation.
Absolutely.
Joseph.
So, so I didn't know that it will trigger that kind of an anxiety attack while going through this and then preparing it. And yeah, I mean, yes, as you say, there are bits of anxiety that comes in. Okay, let's start with
Joseph,
this.
yeah, Joseph. So I think when we thought about this topic, I mean, we also listened to some of the as well as looked at some of the reading material somebody has wrote, all of that. And even though we are not in a stage where it's so overwhelming for us, but we are at a stage where maybe it is better to be aware actually. So yeah, I think from that angle, what do you think are some of the trigger points for anxiety in a dad from a dad's point of view, Joseph? Like you, one additional layer of that question is being a dad for a homeschooling
Homeschooling.
kids. I mean, that's a bigger decision that you guys have taken. So I have like 2-3 more questions follow up to that or that. But yeah, I mean, let's start with what do you think from your point of view the trigger points for anxiety?
So again, I've been thinking about ever since we said let's do this. I've been thinking about what are the trigger points for me, what I have gone through, and I'll talk about three of the incidences. What I have seen is one source of this kind of an anxiety can come in when you are comparing with somebody, either yourself or your kids. And we are going to restrict all of these examples and all of these discussions with respect to kids. So one is when you're comparing and then you are saying, oh my God, is my kid okay? Is he on the right path? So that's one. The second one is when you feel helpless. The situation is there, you don't know what to do. You don't have a help, you don't have an advice. Even if there's an advice, you don't know how to translate that advice into action. So that is the time that at least I have felt anxiety. So I'll give you, at least three examples. So when my son was when my wife was admitted for the pregnancy, the first son, obviously as the tradition has, my wife went to her mom's house. So I was in Delhi, she was in Coimbatore. She was admitted in the hospital. We didn't know what happened. She went via train. I think the train journey from Delhi to Coimbatore probably had some effect on her body. She was admitted in the hospital for about 15 days. I was sitting in Delhi and I didn't get any information in the sense why, what happened, when will she come out, is it normal? I didn't have any information, and she was in ICU. I couldn't talk to her. Her mom can go only once a day, and that time probably like 2-3 minutes is all that I can have a call with her, and WhatsApp and all was not there at that time. So I mean, reception was all bad. So that was an anxious moment. Thankfully, baby was born normally, no cesarean whatsoever, normal. So that was a trigger point for anxiety. That 15 days was really, really tense for me. The second one was with respect to my second son when we were in Panchkula. So he was probably like, 4 years or something. We put him in the pre KG. So in one of the PTMs, the teacher said, "You have to see a psychiatrist, child psychiatrist." I was like, it's big word. Why? Oh, I would call him for correcting his notes, whatever he has written, and he will come to my table and he will sleep off on the table itself. I said, why would I see a psychiatrist for that?
It's a very kid stuff.
Yeah, okay.
So,
See, there's the AC, there's a kids rhyming music, and he is comfortable with you, so he's just slept. But that 1 or 2 weeks, she kept on saying, "You need to see a psychiatrist." Am I doing the right thing? I decided I'm not going to do. Is it the right thing to do? Should I actually see a psychiatrist? Not. That was again a little bit of an anxious period where am I doing the right thing, and so on and so forth. I do know the teacher is good because this is the teacher who helped my elder son when we moved to Panchkula. She was the one who took a special interest on him and taught him Hindi because we went and said we don't speak Hindi here at home. So she took special interest. So she's a good teacher. We know that she's a good teacher. That's why it was difficult. She's a good teacher. Should we take her advice, ignore her advice? We didn't know. So that was a second one, I would say. The third one is when my elder son, for a while when we were in Delhi, he had allergic asthma, bronchitis. So if he would eat any cake, any cream, chocolate, whatever, there was series of stuff, and he will get immediately the asthma, wheezing. And there was a point where it went to the level that in the night, half of the time I had to be awake, administer him nebulization, and half of the time my wife has to administer the nebulization. So it went on for quite long. So obviously you become disoriented because you're not sleeping in the night properly. You're going to work, coming back, too much of pressure. So that was another time which were anxious. So those are the three trigger points, I would say. What about you, KK?
okay, so for me, I think I don't able to recollect 2 3 incidents, but I would say 3 areas which I think that causes anxieties. One is the news, right? Like you see kids, child prodigies, like 8-year-old winning a chess tournament, or somebody writing a program code at 5 years, and a friend's daughter reading a book on her own, while my kids are just learning to just write ABCD, the alphabets. So one is news actually. The other is the friends and network actually. So
Yeah.
friends and network you can't control too much, but yeah, at least the news thing we can say that okay, that's happening somewhere far off, so the impact is somewhat lesser. The third thing also, which I would say is I would think like okay, I grew up in a certain way and some values and other things, and I feel that some of the success that we have achieved is basically because of that. And then I think like, are we doing enough for my kids? Are we doing that same thing, or are we trying to educate them on the values and other things? So that is another point which I think sometimes causes anxiety. Then one more point is like differences of opinion, or sometimes, right, like you have a certain way to raise your kids, while your spouse may be having her own point of view. So that somewhat also brings in anxiety, right? Like because one, you have to convince them, or maybe if not possible, then you have to find a compromise. So always compromise means you are coming down on your standards sometimes, or somebody else is coming down on their standards. So it can mean anything. So that's another trigger point actually. Like I mean, how much are we aligned in raising the kids? But again, right, like my kids are too young to make any significant decision at this point. But these kids who are learning programming or doing programming at age 5, or reading a good book, I mean full book at the age 5 or 6, still causes anxiety. I sometimes it questions me like whether am I taking them in the right direction, or am I being lazy, or am I being so self fulfilled that on my own that I'm not even bothering what the world is or the environment is, I mean, building up. And of course, there will be some impact of that on our kids, right? So whether you like it or not. So these are some things that I feel are trigger points for me, Joseph.
Yeah. So the one that you talked about, right, especially this news of child prodigies, spelling bee winners, and if you see most of the spelling bee winners, it'll be Indian in the US. And oh my God. So then immediately the urge would be, let them learn the dictionary, throw them a dictionary and let them learn all the words in the dictionary and so on and so forth. So it has happened to me also. So as I said, whenever there's a comparison in one form or the other, I've seen kids like of my elder son's age going for horse riding or any of these kinds of sports, again in one form or the other, right? I mean, child prodigy or some form of the other. Or you take them along to somebody's house, they are talking about their kids, and then they say, okay, this he can do, this he can do. Then you are like, I mean, why is he not doing it? So I'll give you another example. So as you know, my younger son Jerry is too much into cars. He knows everything about cars. Any car that you talk about, he'll talk about it. At least that's what I think. So we went to one person's house, a friend's house, and her son knew a lot more about cars, and he was having a YouTube channel on cars. So the immediate urge was for me, Jerry, why can't you start a channel? You already have a channel. Why you already know about cars? Why don't you have this? Then I said, that is transferring my anxiety to the kid. That's not the right thing to do. So it's kind of, it doesn't happen all the time. I do sometimes miss, but I think that's where it is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. These kinds of comparisons, whether it's our family members, friends, news, all of those things can give us that panic
So
sometimes.
actually, the closer the relationships are, then the impact is more. So that's why I felt actually anything you
Absolutely.
hear in news has a lesser impact, at least to some extent to me. Whereas if somebody within the network, our network is doing, then we always think, right? Like they're also like us. I mean, what's stopping
Yeah.
our kids from doing
So
it?
when you hear a news, Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, or William Prince, he does something, yeah, you listen to it, it doesn't really affect you. You either label them as privileged or crazy or something like that, and you move on. But at the same time, you go for your college reunion and you hear your college mates do something or your college mates kids do something. That's when you are like, oh my God, I should have done that. Why I didn't do it? I'm a failure. There's a disappointment, frustration, all of that can come in. So why I'm saying it is, the point that you talked about, the news is far away, but the friends and the family circle, that affects more. That's a proven psychology, so to speak.
So, Joseph, you slightly touched about it, but I just wanted to explore this topic a little further in the context of your homeschooling environment. So, I mean, kids, I know your son's age. So, at this age, especially boys, I mean, maybe I'm trying to bring in some bias, but I'm trying to say that, okay. So, the boys generally, okay, so they have a natural affinity to be part of the sports, to be a part of the social stuff, things like that. So, naturally, if they're in school, they'll get exposed to so many other things, activities, physical activities and other things, right? Like the team bonding activities and other things. Now you're doing homeschooling, so don't you think that also, I mean, what sort of anxiety that has on you? Like how are you managing that? Like do you have anything resolved for
You,
it now?
your question has raised anxiety levels much higher for me now.
I think that was partly the reason also.
I can sense it.
Objective.
So you are right. So when we went through this homeschooling decision, as you know, we didn't do it from when they were, yeah, I mean, they did go to normal school for a while, and then only for the last 3 years or so we are doing homeschooling. Part of the blame lies with you because you introduced Mahen, and then I talked to Mahendra and then did this, right? So I'm just returning that favor, whatever you did. So
I'm equally invested in your children's growth,
so
Joseph.
if they didn't, then I'm going to say it is KK uncle's mistake, not mine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now
So
I have the
so
responsibility of 4 kids.
so when we went through that particular decision journey, it was not one day decision. We almost went through that for almost like 8 months. So we talked about all the different angles, what they will have, what they will not have, what we will be able to do, we will not be able to do. All of that we went through. Especially my wife and I, we went through all of that kind of scenario planning, what we can do, what we cannot do, what we can offer, what we cannot offer, at what stage. In fact, at one point in time, we even thought after a certain point in time, we will move to Bangalore, especially one particular place where there's a colony, and so on and so forth. So we went to all of those planning. Because we went through all of that discussion together before taking the decision, now facing the consequence of that decision has become a lot more easier now. So now when certain things are there, either she will say, my wife will say, or I will say, we discussed it. I mean, this is what it is going to be, right? Obviously we discuss that with kids, but I mean, they may not really understand the significance of that particular consequence. But even now when we discuss this happens. Okay, now coming back to the question that you particularly asked, so we are aware that we will not be able to expose them to all that can happen in the school. So it is not, homeschooling is not school at home. It's an entirely different mindset. It is not that at all, school at home, right? So for physical activity and everything, at least, so during winter we are not doing much, but say for example mid Feb onwards, what we do is the kids do exercise at home, everything like push up, jumping jacks, skipping, all of that. My elder one, he comes with me for jogging for about 4-5 kilometers. So he does get that physical activity, but not like, say for example, a sports like football or basketball or any of those kinds of stuff. Which what we are planning is, I have like we will I'll send him to a badminton club here. He's interested in badminton. My brother-in-law is interested in badminton. Probably my elder son got inspiration from my brother-in-law. He took him to the badminton court a couple of times. So he wants to join badminton club. So we are waiting for this cold winter season to be over. After that, we will take him. So it's going to be very specific rather than kind of exposing for everything. It's going to be specific. So that's the way we are handling it.
Okay, great. Good to know.
Yeah. So I think like I want to touch upon that particular point from the anxiety level. What has worked for us together as a family? You also talked about one has to compromise, all of those kinds of stuff. What I find is, if we sit down and talk and we do a pre-planning, this is going to happen, and these are the things that can happen. You run around some of the scenarios. Since you are part of this Gravitas Wins community, also one of the session that I talked about, the scenario planning. So if you do that scenario planning, either the future consequence will fall into any one of those scenarios, or it will fall somewhere similar to that particular scenario. Then it becomes a lot more easier. Yeah, we have discussed it. Obviously at that particular moment it's become difficult, but you have discussed it, so it's okay. We have to do this kind of a thing will come in. The other one that has helped us, we also go through the same thing, like what you said. Somebody will have to compromise, and whoever compromises feels I'm sacrificing, I'm doing all of those kinds of stuff. So we kind of, certain things we know I have to take care, certain things the decision lies with my wife. I will tell her, but she's the decision making authority. Some of the things I am the decision making authority. So that kind of we have agreed upon it. So we don't interfere in that particular thing. So far it has worked out fine. As I said, only when they bring their girlfriend, marriage, admissions, only then that tension, that agreement is going to be tested. So probably we will do a session probably like 10 years down the line, and then we will see where it goes.
Yeah, that makes for a very good reunion of sorts.
Yeah. Yes. How do you cope up, KK?
So far, I don't think I'm there yet, actually. So, yeah, I think few things I'm learning actually, because so far the pressure has not been there. But yeah,
Mm.
slowly we are getting into that because
But
they're
let me
just
ask you
in,
this, KK.
yeah,
Let me ask you this, KK. Right? I mean, you touched upon this particular point, like the societal pressure.
yeah,
You have a daughter.
yeah.
Is there any pressure you need to save this much money? Oh, there's a daughter. Anything at all that happens?
Again, so far it is not there. My wife had hinted at some point that we need to do something about it. I said, okay. I think now anyway she's like 5 years old, so
Mm.
it's fine. So we have at least some sort of saving mechanism, so it's there for the family reserve and other things. But yeah, specifically to look at special one kid versus the other, what special preparation we need to do. We have not gone to that level or to that extent. Yeah, see, for me, I'm thinking my goal, at least, right? Like the societal pressure is going to be there. It's just that if my goal is okay, if my kids can respect or have same set of feelings like I have for my
Yeah.
father, at least 50% of the thing, then I think I've done a decent job.
Absolutely.
So,
I say the same thing to my kids. Absolutely,
yeah.
KK. Yeah.
So, so yeah, I think that is the motive with which I am pursuing this journey, because I mean, I always also question sometimes like my father's approach versus what I am doing,
Mm,
things like
mm,
that. Then there is another element to it. My wife is also working, so are
mm.
we spending enough time for the kids? Versus when my mother, she was a homemaker, so we always had her at home and to take care of nurture and care while my father was away. So there's all these conflicting and different attributes that comes into the play. One other angle that I'm also thinking about loud these days is now that I also have taken a little bit a different career decision. So should we live in a very big metro like Chennai, in an apartment atmosphere where, as of now, even though they are in kindergarten, not much to be done, but schoolhouse is it's what mostly it is. Or maybe they will roam around with the apartment children, so there are not many, versus the sort of exposure that I got living in a small town like Madurai, in a very protected environment like a community campus, a museum campus. So it allowed me to explore a lot of things in a very protected environment versus what sort of exposure they get in a metro city like this. Then again, the question is the pace of the growth, and I mean a lot of things. Is it the right decision to stay put in metro only, because anyway they need to come to the city or any metro city for them in the future most of the times, versus a lot of people going to tier 2 town to build their future, right? Like even we ourselves have all moved from tier 2 tier 3 towns to metros. So all these are something that goes through
Yeah.
my mind. I have not got any decision, or have not made any decision one way or the other yet. But what are your factors that are influencing
Yeah.
this?
So that's a good point, KK. Even I wanted to ask because you shifted that particular career, you become a freelance independent person. So, like, I'm sure while doing that particular decision, going through that particular journey of that decision making, I'm sure all of these considerations also were there. I mean, I'm a dad of two kids and all of those kinds of stuff, right? The other pressure that builds anxiety is either our own or somebody else's, the being a perfect dad. Husband should be the breadwinner, he should bring in more money, all those kinds of what that perfect dad means. And we also have, either we want to emulate our dad or somebody we saw in screen and then we want to emulate them, or so on and so forth. So we also have an image of what a perfect dad is, and or what I want to be, and then we kind of compare and then always say, oh, I'm falling short, or we are a little proud that, oh, I didn't, all of those kinds of stuff. So I think that puts a lot of pressure as well. The reason why I'm saying is the decision that you talked about. Should I stay in a metro, not in a metro? It is not only about your monetary aspect, your health, not only about your career choices, but it's also about the future of the kids. So that can put a lot of pressure. So for me, Panchkula is a tier 2 city. Probably like when I moved in, it was probably a tier 3 city. But what I found over the long period of time, again, when you are asking this question and while preparing for this particular episode as well, it has actually worked out really well for me. One, almost everything that I need, whether it is at that particular point in time, school, church, my office is 8 minutes drive. Sorry, 18 minutes drive. So everything for that matter, the market, hospital, or a clinic, all of these things is probably in about 20 minutes, either walkable 20 minutes or drivable 20 minutes. Ton of restaurants, all of those kinds of stuff. So anything that we need is somewhere nearby. Quality of life is really good. There is no hurry like what's in the metro. So I've lived in Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, all of these places. So I know what that life is. So in all of that aspect, it is fantastic. The one of the thing is obviously the education, kids education. There are plenty of schools here as well. So that even if I were to decide to go to school, it's not a problem. The added advantage what had happened is, because it's a small city, I could reach out to anybody. So because of the homeschooling, I take my kids to workshops, every industry visits and all of those kinds of stuff. Every quarter, I go to an industry. Because it's a small city, I can go in and I'm working in this particular company, and then they will know that particular company, and fine, I mean, come along. And then I have taken them to all of these. So it becomes really an advantage point for networking, for raising kids as in a homeschooling manner. In all of those aspects, it has really, really worked well.
Yeah.
Because of internet, you can also reach out to anybody. So the second son reached out to or did something. I posted on Twitter and YouTube and shared on some Discord and some links. Some of his work has been praised by some entrepreneurs, so to speak, the internet entrepreneurs and so on and so forth. So it has become a lot more easier to do all of those kinds of stuff. So in a lot of ways, it has helped. And I would highly encourage a lot of people to consider that really with all the rising prices in Bombay and all of those kinds of stuff. I really encourage.
True.
The one thing is, you are right. When they touch that college and post-college, probably they should go to a metro city, live there for a while. They should do that. So when I think about it, I asked in one of the episodes that I did, he's my mentor. So I asked Sastri, who was my guest at that time. So he said, striking a balance between ambition and contentment is difficult. When you are young, you should be, completely 100% ambitious. And as you age, you should be content. So I'm going to follow the same principle for kids as well.
What age that should be?
Absolutely. That's a question I'm going to go and ask him.
when the balance shifts in content favor or
so let's stay as this particular episode scope. So in that, as long as they are reaching that college age and everything, I'm going to make them stay here. But once they hit that 20 age, I'm going to send them to Bangalore or wherever, wherever they want to go. My elder one's dreams are all here, Bangalore, Delhi, whatever. My younger ones is all Toronto, London.
as always ambitious, the guy.
That guy is ambitious. I've said I can fulfill the elder one's ambitions. The younger one, if you want to go to Toronto and London, you're on your own. So
I'm sure he will find a path on his own. He's on that direction.
Yeah. And that puts pressure as well, and anxious.
True. We have not spoken about kids creating anxiety yet. We're just on the stage of, okay, we are getting anxious about various other things.
Yeah. So, we have talked for about a half hour. Do you have this, what I talked about, the pressure of being a perfect dad? How do you handle it? Because all the other things I can understand. Our kids are young, your kids are young, much younger than mine, and all of those kinds of stuff. But I struggle with this particular thing. I struggle with this even now, that what image you have as of a dad or a perfect dad, how do you handle that? So do you have any problem like that?
So far, this question, right, I thought over now also and earlier also, what is to be done. But I think instead of being a perfect, I said, okay, can I be a good dad? Right? I think that is a little more easier.
Achievable.
Achievable, at least something to aspire for, actually. So I think so that change in perspective is helping. Second thing is, I also struggle, right? Like, who is a good dad? What sort of
Mm,
qualities one
mm,
should
mm,
have?
mm, mm.
Whether you call it perfect or good. I mean, we are trying to name it in a way, certain way to be aspiring for, right? Like, so I'm just trying to understand, like, should I follow my father's path, or maybe, or something else, somebody else, somebody in the network whom we know, somebody like you is already ahead of the journey, doing something different, and making sure the kids are really good. So this struggle is real, and I don't know, I have not found any answer. But like I said, right, like, maybe when my kids are like maybe in the mid 20s or 30s or
Yeah.
late 40s, if they can feel that, okay, my dad has been, okay, a respectable person, at least 50% of what I am giving it to my father, then I think that's the time when you can even evaluate yourself on that aspect, right? Like, now
So,
you all can build the qualities, but the real test comes when what your kid says about you, whether you have been a perfect dad, good dad, nice dad, bad
or
dad,
go, okay, enough, dad.
okay, no dad, whatever it
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be, right? Like, so
You're
yeah,
true. You're
yeah,
right. So I feel the same. I have enormous respect for my dad, for what he has achieved, what he has done. He never gave up on any of those kinds of stuff. We have talked about it earlier. So I have enormous respect for my dad. So I keep telling my boys and my wife also, if I achieve 50% of what my dad achieved, I will feel that I'm successful. And if my kids would feel that I did reasonable enough, like my their grandfather, I would be happy as well. So that's my benchmark. I don't have any great
I think
ambition.
we are setting the same goals for ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. Finally, KK, parting thoughts. Anybody who is struggling with this dad anxiety, any thoughts, anything at all?
So, few things which I would say is, although I'm not in a situation to give advice, but few things I think would work, right? Like, one is to stay a little away from the news and trying to compare ourselves. One thing with. Second thing is, we also spoke about this family culture and values and other things. So if we can build something on that angle, right? Like, so one is actually creating the future. The other
Mm,
is getting people ready for the future. I mean, building the qualities for the kids, so that, because future we don't know like what it will be. So, and I don't think we are in a position to create the future also, at least not sure. But for sure we can create a good solid foundation, build the qualities for the kids so that they can thrive in any atmosphere, because adaptability, flexibility, learnability, and all the lot of qualities can be actually groomed when you're building the family values and culture and things like that. So I think focusing on that could be a better way to look at it. And then, yeah, I'm sure all of us go through this journey. We all have our doubts. So meeting like-minded folks like you, or somebody within their network, and everyone, right? Like, they will always have their sounding board and other things. So if you have a wider network, both sides, right? Like, sometimes you may need to talk to some elder woman who was ahead of the journey, so to understand, okay, why sometimes your wife is behaving certain way with your kids, right? So maybe that will also help, instead of talking only to the parents, I mean dad side. So talk to some of the earlier moms, right? Like, so I think those are something which I feel could be helpful.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm going to summarize that, and that's a perfect place to end this particular conversation. Is that the only thing that has helped us? I also shared the same thing, and then KK also shared that. What has helped us is, one, I don't think you can stop comparing, but at least you can eliminate as much as possible. If you can do that, probably keep the news at a far distant, stop comparing yourself with others. That's one. Second, have a sounding board within your network. It would be better with whom you can talk, you can ask advice. So have a sounding board and build a family culture, whatever culture that you want. That will actually be a antidote to a lot of anxiety that can come in. So that's a perfect answer. And if you want to learn about how to build a family culture, we did an episode, the previous episode. I will make a link to it as well, so please watch that as well. Thank you, KK.
thank you, Joseph.
I hope you find this conversation interesting. If you find the conversation interesting and useful, Can you please subscribe, rate, and review this episode? And don't forget to share the podcast with others. Wish you a happy dad journey.